Hello, everyone. This is game 3 from my tournament in Barcelona, the WOSC. I won my first two games. First one was smooth sailing. The second one was the exact opposite. I was completely lost. In fact, my opponent had mate, but I managed to swindle that game. And so let's see how the third game goes. So in this game, I was Sente. I went ahead and started out with my standard rook pawn opening. Um, and my opponent played a static rook opening, but it was a little bit strange. He didn't kind of open up his bishop diagonal right away. Um, so here he decides to bring out the silver. I could exchange the rook pawn immediately, um, but it kind of feels bad to me to do it because then I have to like take and then bring it back, and so I'd rather just like develop my pieces a bit more. So I went ahead and opened up the bishop diagonal, and my opponent decided to do a one-turn loss bishop exchange. So I, generally speaking, do not play bishop exchanges. The only time I play bishop exchanges is when my opponents initiate that bishop trade, and it's essentially a one-turn loss for them. Otherwise, I would block it. Um, and every once in a while, my opponents essentially play a two-turn loss bishop exchange against me, and I'm happy to play that. And since my opponent has lost a tempo, I generally like to play aggressively. Now here, I could have dropped the bishop to 5-3. I'm going to pause it really quickly and go over to to Lee Shogi. You can see here I was analyzing the game a bit earlier. And the reason why I didn't want to drop the bishop right away is because I thought my opponent could drop a bishop to 6-4 and force me to trade it off because it's hitting my rook. It turns out that this is actually very, very good for me because here, instead of dropping the bishop back to 5-3, I can actually drop it on 6-3. And this pawn on 5-4 is very, very difficult to defend. And so just as an example, like, you might think, okay, maybe I can hit the rook. But actually I can block with the silver. I can even block with the knight. And now this pawn on 5-4 is not defendable. And then your bishop would be hanging as well. So this would have been really good for me, actually. I didn't see that. And so what I decided to do is to move my silver up in order to block the bishop from hitting my rook. I fully expected my opponent to prevent me from dropping that bishop, but he decided not to. I think probably it's just a bit of an oversight. He kind of left the opening there for one move, and I thought, okay, maybe he might do it again. I did think it was a bit strange that he decided to bring the gold to 5-1. Generally speaking, you'd bring it to 5-2. But now I get this bishop drop. It's threatening to take the silver. It's threatening to promote to either side. My opponent goes ahead and drops the bishop, which protects the silver. But now I get to make horse. So here I'm already feeling pretty good about the game. I made a horse. My opponent didn't. And my opponent had to drop the bishop as well. And this bishop is really doing nothing right now. My opponent went to central rook and is starting to develop his pieces, but he kind of hung his pawn on 8-3 with this silver move. He's kind of realizing it right now. And so I'm like, okay, free pawn. Let's go pawn grubbing. And yeah, again, like I was feeling very confident already in the start of this game. And I think in general, just I got a decent amount of good positions out of the opening in this tournament. So here my opponent goes ahead and develops his silver up the board. I do the same to help defend. I'm not 100% sure what this was about either. Again, I probably just an oversight. But yeah, I can just take the pawn. And so now I'm feeling really good, right? I got two pawns for free. I have a horse to a bishop. So this is actually just a great position for me. Go ahead and jump my knight. My opponent tries to attack my horse with the gold, but I can just pull it back. It looks a little bit scary because this pawn push is coming, but actually I can just dodge it, right, with horse up to 4-5. My opponent goes ahead and I believe, yeah, he goes ahead and brings the silver up the board. which is a little bit scary. He can start attacking on 5-6, but I have this really nice move, pawn to 6-6. It hits the silver, and so even though the silver hits my horse, that pawn on 6-6 opened up a spot for my horse to retreat to. And now I think, yeah, he's bringing the gold up, but he's pretty stuck. So here, I'm going to pause it really quickly. I decided to go with this silver move to 4-5. I'm going to show exactly what I was thinking. It's right here. The computer wants me to go pawn to 3-5 and leverage this diagonal. Makes perfect sense. What I wanted is I saw this formation and I wanted to drop a silver here. That's what I was thinking. And so I thought, okay, if I go silver to 4-5, I'm threatening to take the bishop. And so the silver trade has to happen, right? Even if he retreats the bishop or something, I'm going to get the silver trade. And so this was my idea in this position. It's slightly worse than what the engine wants to do, which is something like this, and to just jump the knight immediately because it's hitting the silver. So yeah, I get the silver trade in. I go ahead and jump my knight with tempo while recapturing the silver. That felt pretty good to me. My opponent retreats the silver. And I get my juicy Wariuchi no Ging on 4-1 here. So that's kind of what I was playing for in the last few moves. And I got exactly what I wanted. My opponent runs the rook away. I'm obviously going to go ahead and take the gold. And now I'm still in a very good position. The problem for me in this position is I just couldn't find a great continuation. And I start going wrong, actually. So we're in this position now in the game, and for me it wasn't complete. Well, the first move to me was completely clear, which is pawn 2-4. And this was obvious to me that it needs to happen, right? You want to go ahead and give your rook the option to kind of run up the board. But I didn't really see a great follow-up, right? It's like I have a gold in hand, can't really drop it anywhere. Couldn't really find a way to make something like this work. Oops, not this way. Maybe like some pawn drop something here. So I was actually struggling to come up with a move. Like I'm looking at the position, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely way better. And actually the best move is the obvious move. You just take the pawn. And then when your opponent redrops, you can actually take here because your opponent is out of pawns, and if they go ahead and try and block with the silver, either up or maybe like a silver drop, you can just take it. If he takes with the bishop, great, we got a knight for a silver trade, and now this bishop is stuck and pinned. And if he takes with the silver, we can actually just go ahead and take the bishop. I'm not sure which way you would take, but maybe something like this, right? So here my attack continues pretty well, and then okay, I can make some bishop drops combining with the silver. So here, yeah, it was. If I would have just like took my time and tried to actually read the entire variation, I think this is a bit obvious to know. Okay, like he only has one pawn, but alas, I didn't go for this. Instead, what I decided to do was, okay, let me push my third file pawn, and then I can attack on the third file with a pawn drop, trade off the knights, drop it back, or here, trade off and try and attack on this diagonal. Turns out it's not that good. And I think the reason it's not that good is this knight that I have on 4-5 is an absolute menace, and there's no real way for my opponent to get rid of it. Even if he does something like bring the gold to 5-4, I can just defend it with pawn 4-6, and the knight is just completely dominating the position. But instead, like I let him take with this bishop, and now he can push the pawn if he wants, and then I'm really just giving up a pawn to trade knights. So yeah, this was just clearly just not the way to play in this position. And here I felt like I had to drop the gold. And so the big threat here is actually this knight drop. Sorry, knight drop on 5/6 is a big threat. I can't take it with the pawn; it's pinned, and then just like leaving it there and like I don't know, like retreating, um, retreating the king this way and then taking and having this staring at me was scary. Um, yeah, and so you can see kind of the evaluation. Like before I made some of these moves, the evaluation is at like +8. And then, I missed the rook running up the board. And then I traded the knights, which wasn't great. And now I drop the gold, and all of a sudden the evaluation's all the way down to +3. My opponent finds this great move, silver drop on 3/7, forking my gold and the rook. And even in this position, what the engine wants is for me to sack off the rook. Um, and then it wants me to play something like this. Yeah, yeah. I don't think I would ever find this or ever play this. At least for now. Maybe in the future. But this apparently is still good for me, at least slightly. But then once I run the rook and trade off these metal general pieces, gold for the silver, now all of a sudden the position is just completely equal. And then I played rook over to 4/9, which is a move I actually quite liked. It's hitting the bishop, the pawn's back here, so it's hard for him to defend it. And it's scoping all the way to 4/3, which is right now is only defended by the king. But yeah, engine doesn't really like it. But I had some ideas here. And I think actually, practically speaking, it's not a bad position for me. It's just that the engine finds a way to defend perfectly, pretty much in every spot. And I generally like playing attacking style, and it's hard to attack against the engine that doesn't make any mistakes. But yeah, so I thought this was a very, very good attacking move. My opponent goes ahead and promotes the bishop, and I go for the gusto with silver drop on 2/3, and my opponent actually ends up taking it. And so I edit these videos and I take out a lot of the thinking time in between moves, because otherwise we'd be sitting here for like an hour and a half because these games are quite long. But actually my opponent only thought for like 5 to 10 seconds here, which was really surprising to me. It's like when I'm sacking the silver like that, obviously like this is kind of like the moment in the game that's gonna really matter the most. I thought he'd take a bit more time to decide, and I actually thought he couldn't take it. So this is what transpired in the game. I thought he couldn't take it because it lets my rook in. And in this position, I have some gigantic threats. I have this threat to take the pawn on 3/4 with my horse. Silver can't take, it's pinned. So if that happens, it's completely winning for me. And I even have this threat of knight drop on 3/5. Same idea, the pawn is pinned. So if I get either of those moves in, uncontested, it's going to be an absolutely great position for me. So that's why I went for this line. Engine engine is the engine, and it finds some really nice ways to defend. So essentially in this position, because I'm threatening these two moves, what my opponent needs to do is somehow defend both of these squares, the 3/4 and the 3/5 square. And there's essentially two ways to do it. One is directly and one is indirectly. So the indirect one, which is the engine's second best move, it's a crazy one. It's knight drop on 5/6. And what this does is it's check, and it blocks my horse's diagonal. So A, horse can't take, and B, knight drop on 3/5 does nothing. They can just take. So this is the second best move according to the engine. The crazy thing is I'm supposed to take with the horse to force my opponent to use a tempi to recapture, and then I can drop a knight to continue making threats. This is a completely even game. So that's one option. And the other option is to defend directly. I think this is actually also a more human move, which is gold drop on 4/4. So A, obviously, defends 3/4. B, defends 3/5. C, hits the dragon and forces it to move. So this is, dealing with my threat while gaining tempo on my dragon here. So this would have been the best move in the position. And if my opponent would have found it, the position, it would have been in his favor, because I'm going to have to kind of like run in, and I only have a knight, so I don't have a clear attack in this position anymore. So yeah, this would have been a difficult game for me. I think it's still like, at an amateur level, pretty even, right? So I've made a horse that's, making it very difficult to attack my camp. I've made a dragon that's attacking, but I'm down material because I sacrificed that silver. So yeah, yep. So again, yeah, I promoted my dragon and made these two gigantic threats. My opponent decides to drop the silver on 2/5, which unfortunately only defends one of the threats. It does not defend the knight drop threat. And now, because I got this knight drop off, I'm in a completely winning position now. The crazy thing is, that the engine evaluation of that position after the knight drop here is basically the same as the evaluation that I had earlier in the game. It was like +8 or +9. And I look at those two positions, and the earlier one, I'm just like, I don't even know how to proceed, right? And this one, it's like, oh, I'm completely winning. I can't possibly lose. His king's getting mated. So yeah, it's just crazy how the computer evaluates these positions sometimes. Sometimes it's really not that relevant. Um, so here my opponent dropped the gold on 2/2 with the idea that it's hitting my dragon and it's defending the 2/3 square, because otherwise, I could maybe like drop a silver or move the dragon there. But you can see obviously the engine really, really hates it. And the reason is he needed to actually start running his king to have any chance of getting out. And even to the point where in this position, the number one move is to take with the dragon, but the number two move is to actually just go ahead and push the pawn to block the king from coming up the board. But instead, okay, he drops this gold, and I found a very nice move here, which is to ignore the threat on my dragon and push the pawn. And he actually can't take the dragon because I can just drop my silver on 1/5 and it would be mate. And so here I pick up the silver, and now he has to try and run. But because the silver is gone, I can come up with the horse. And now this is just really a matter of time. Even if I mess up the attack a little bit, my opponent really has no attack of his own. So I just have to keep making threats, and I'm going to be completely fine. So yeah, I get my horse into the attack. I got my dragon into the attack, running away from the goal at the same time. And now I go ahead and prevent his king from running further up the board by dropping the silver. Excuse me. And here, yeah, sometimes it can be very tricky to try and trap your opponent's king from coming up the board. And obviously there's a reason why there's the impasse rule, is that it becomes very difficult to attack the king once they've entered your camp. But in this case, he really only has that one horse backing him up. My opponent tries to block my dragon while also, adding pieces to this impasse attempt, or Nugyoku, right? The king entering. I go ahead and drop the pawn to 1/8. And this is already now in a mating sequence. I go ahead and drop the pawn to 2/8. If my opponent retreats, it's going to be mate. So he goes ahead and takes my pawn with his horse. And now I can just take it. My opponent takes, but now my rook's going to get back into the game by taking this knight. And it's just a matter of can I find the right moves to mate my opponent here. I'm not sure if I actually found a mate, but like at this point, I have too many like very, very strong pieces in this attack with the dragon, the horse that are already promoted. The reason why it can be very difficult to mate your opponent's king in your own camp is that, and he actually just resigned after this pawn drop. But yeah, the reason why it can be very difficult to mate a king that's entering is because your pieces don't get to promote, right? And when your pieces don't get to promote, they don't cover as many squares. But my pieces are already promoted, so it was a little bit easier for me to mate my opponent here. So, this was a game where I thought it was going to be smooth sailing in the beginning. I thought things were going absolutely swimmingly for me. I had really, my opponent had no chances of making any threats. I had all kinds of attacking ideas, but I made a couple inaccuracies in a row. I think it was like 3 or 4 moves in a row where like it wasn't a gigantic blunder where you go from like +8 to like -10, something like that, but it was like 3, 4, 5 moves in a row where I went from like +8, +6, +4, 2, 0. So yeah, it's interesting where even when you have a very good position, if you're not finding the exact right moves, you can kind of like lose that advantage pretty quickly. But yeah, luckily I had that interesting silver sack into rook promotion, and then my opponent didn't quite defend correctly, and I got a nice win and a nice attack at the end of the game. So yeah, it was like a gigantic turnaround for me. Obviously, starting the team tournament 0-3, doing a little bit better in the blitz, going 4-3 in the blitz, and then I started out the main tournament going 3-0. Now again, part of that is I was playing lower rated players. And these first 3 games were all played all in one day. So that was like the first day of the main tournament. All of the team games and the blitz games were played on the first day. And then so this was the second day that I was in Barcelona, or technically the second day that I was playing shogi in Barcelona. And then so the next game, game 4, it would be the first will be the first game of day 3 for me, and that game actually is probably the best game I played in Barcelona, both in terms, I think, of the quality of my play, but also in terms of quality of my opponent's play. That game is super intense, and so I'm really looking forward to going over that one and analyzing it, because there are some crazy endgame calculations that I think both of us were making. And it was very clear to me that not only was I calculating well in the endgame, my opponent was as well. So look forward to that. If you want to make sure that you don't miss that video, subscribe, hit the notification button, and I'll see you next time.